call to action for long-distance transport industry has been raised following the gas tanker explosion tragedy in Boksburg on Saturday. The incident has opened the debate about safety management of transport for dangerous goods and making sure that all checks and balances are adhered to. Our Volker von Widdern, Strategic Risk leader at Riskonet Africa, joins us for more. A very good afternoon to you, evening rather, Volker. Thank you for joining us here on the SABC.
You're welcome.
Perhaps we could get into, this conversation and the debate that really has been opened. And you could walk us through, how this Boksburg gas tanker tragedy is going to serve as a wake-up call for the logistics and transport companies to date.
Yeah, look, it's a tragedy. And of course, we're all concerned, and our condolences to the families that have suffered and lost loved ones. One looks at it on the outside. Obviously, we haven't investigated the scene of the accident, but in principle, it does seem implausible that a tanker gets stuck underneath a bridge. And so one needs to go back and think, well, how and what circumstances led to this happening? Why was it on the scheduled route? How was the route tested? What all the circumstances that may have led to it? Perhaps a smaller tanker did go under that bridge and was successful, and this was a bigger one. There are many, many questions about what the plausible set of circumstances may be to get to this point. And of course, it seems like common sense that this should never happen. So were the routes tested? Were they measured? Were they validated? What was the risk management that was taking place? Have various tankers been on the same route for the same reasons, carrying the same loads? And of course, the answer rhetorically to all of that is unlikely, so one would say, but how did this happen? So of course the answer to what I'm suggesting here is that it's an entirely avoidable set of circumstances, and to be stuck under a bridge in this way seems to be the worst of risks and tragedies compounded on each other, considering the neighbors, the houses and the hospital that were in near proximity.
So talk to us then, the role of technology and how it can then be used optimally to monitor routes and drivers, perhaps also aid in avoiding such tragedies rather.
Yeah, so technology, we all know telematics, and we know where the truck or the tanker may be driving on a particular road. The technology is not going to tell you what the height differential on a bridge is, but it will tell you that the tanker has stopped in an irregular fashion. And it'll tell you a lot of other things, like the temperature of the tank is going up. And there are a whole lot of readings that should be happening within the tank, its contents, the way the pressure was building up. There's a lot that technology will be telling you there. And, my suggestion would be it should go further. There should be opportunities to remote control a dangerous goods tanker, such as pressure release valves and the like. And obviously, if you're releasing gas into an environment, you don't want that to cause a bigger problem, but you don't want it to be causing an explosion either. So there could be all sorts of warnings that are attached to a tanker with, sirens going off, and then the pressure release is activated remotely by the control room. So there are lots of other ways in which you can use technology to perhaps limit what a tanker that's carrying a dangerous good may do in the circumstance. And of course, it comes down to cost and justification and really thinking about all these scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. Cost is definitely an important factor there. But I think another important factor is also driver education, particularly in emergencies. How would you say that's also now come to the fore during this incident?
Well, of course, driver management is a big one.
Yeah.
And one doesn't know whether there was any pressure on the driver for timing, for meeting a deadline, for whether the driver had actually driven on that route before. And within education, of course, there are a lot of issues that go to a point. But if you're looking at the consequences of something going wrong, when you're driving an LPG tanker, you're driving a bomb, effectively, that needs to be controlled in various circumstances. And unfortunately, it led to the most tragic consequences here. So driver education has a bit of a contrast against either scheduled pressure or maybe a new route or a new truck. The driver may well have been driving for 7 years, as I think was reported, but was it on this truck and in this route? So the education element, I think, goes into a variety of sectors where things need to be monitored and considered from a variety of angles. Risk management is about considering uncertainties in the future, and making sure that you can deal with those uncertainties and not exacerbate the risks in those situations.
And so then as we look at the value chain and the different stakeholders, when we look at the role of municipalities and traffic authorities as well, what would you say is their role, perhaps as we look at the importance of road signage, being visible and marked properly, as well as adequate warning signs are made clear?
Yeah, fair enough. Every single bridge has got a height measurement next to it, and it's quite possible that that bridge, because we've all driven around, may have had a very dusty or very a poorly described height measurement on the side. But either way, when you're in this kind of dangerous location, my view is that the route should be tested. It should be driven in advance and measured and known to be safe to a certain route. And in that context, the combination of route allowance, and if you then, it's almost like an airplane. If you file a route with an LPG tanker with the local authority and saying, I'm going to go down street A, and they say, no, street A has a bridge in it, you're not allowed to go down that road, that's a red sign. So that the routing and scheduling and protection of routes is very important. Now, there's an interesting stat that happened in the States where, of course, they're driving the other side of the road. But in South African context, they made sure that their drivers only turned left at every intersection, because they only had to cross into traffic from one side. And the incidents reduced by 10% in a year because the truck only turned left, and they had to carry on going around until they could turn left again. And that meant that the truck would never cross the oncoming traffic and never be confronted by a T-boned type of accident. So those kind of strict measures, in case there could be training, but there are ways in which you can specifically limit certain kinds of risks. Of course, other than checking the routes and things like that. Routes go to many things: mountainous routes, extreme weather, traffic conditions, the time of the day or night. There are many other factors that go into it, and training, as you mentioned earlier.
Well, it's clear that these measures and more are going to be explored on the back of that tragedy, but we're going to have to leave the conversation there for now. Thank you very much for your time, Volker von Widdern, a strategic risk leader at the Riskonet Africa, weighing on the back of the Boksburg gas tanker tragedy that occurred on Saturday. There's been a call to action for long-distance transport industry. This obviously follows that explosion, perhaps looking at ways to mitigate against that from occurring in the future. Again, thank you very much to Volker for his time here on the SABC.